I got into blockchain because I wanted to fundraise for tech. Games are going to be one of the main ways to actually create mass adoption. So it's this truth transparency layer that allows us to do all sorts of different things like voting on chain, but also like sharing digital assets, and nobody can stop us. A billion people will lose their jobs due to AI, which means a lot of people will have a lot of free time on their hands. And how are they going to have purpose? We're going to find ways that these people can actually find value.
You've reached Toby and Brent. We'll get back to you.
So yeah, fantastic to have you here as sort of my teacher of regulation is in this space.
Yeah, I know people don't like regulation. I mean, we're all degens, right? And we want to play games like no one else does, but sometimes you need rules, and it keeps people safe and happy.
No, I think it's extremely important to have rules, right? I mean, I think it's the only way this whole thing will become more mainstream and will also be more organized. And I know that you're well versed in Malta and many other jurisdictions, so obviously would love to touch on these points, because I mean, we're also very excited. I mean, that's why we put also our organization into Singapore to like understand what are some of the more forward-thinking nations, right? And I would definitely say Malta is one of them.
Yeah.
So I'd love to understand a little bit more like where you come in. Also, of course, a little bit of your background, right?
Yeah,
Why do you end up in this boring regulation space? Why are you not doing meme coins and fun things?
Oh, okay.
So,
so it's actually quite a fun story. So I'm actually a serial entrepreneur. I built 17 different businesses. Most of them are still running today. I own radio stations and media companies. But I got into blockchain because I wanted to fundraise for tech. It was back in 2017. The ICOs were all the craze. And I was like, Malta, they don't raise money for tech. They would do a building, they'd do a club, but they wouldn't give me money for any tech startup. And I said, okay, let's try this. So I started learning about it, got a little bit in too late. So I think I was ready to go about March 18, which was like, the downslide. And so we held and held. But then I fell in love with blockchain, right? So it's this truth transparency layer that allows us to do all sorts of different things like voting on chain, but also like sharing digital assets. And nobody can stop us doing something cool. Like if I want to send you something, nobody can stop it. It's just between you and me. Or if I have some like weird, I don't know, thing I like to buy and I don't want anybody to know about it, today we have to go through banks and we have to go through all these people and they have to know. But with tokens, just allows this this movement between me and you, and that's all. The buyer and the seller. So I fell in love with it back then. And what happened was I started actually advising a lot of projects first. So before I came onto the government side, I was just advising projects in the space and building network and community, much like you guys probably in your initial stages, and just trying to help them from my business side, like the Web 2 business side. How can we incorporate that into Web 3 so that when market goes down, they don't go under, right? So they'll have like traditional business values that keep them going. So did that for a long time. Was again speaking in a lot of events around the world, mainly on mass adoption and sort of the GameFi. In fact, in 2018, I was one of the few guys who was saying games are going to be one of the main ways to actually create mass adoption. Fast forward. Actually, I lied. So at that time, I was also talking about Malta a lot, not because I was a regulator or anything, but it was because it was an easy way to get people's attention, because everybody was like so hyped about Malta at the time. Because we were actually setting up the first blockchain regulation and digital assets regulation back in 2018. Nobody else had one, and we were doing one, so everybody wanted to know about it. So I became known as Mr. Malta in the space, more than the projects I was doing.
I have to pause you for a second, right? Because Malta is not on everybody's radar.
No.
Right?
No.
So you live in Malta?
Yeah, I live in Malta. I've been there.
How is Malta? That's my first question.
Okay.
Is that a place where I should move to? Is that cool?
Let me put it this way. I've been there 34 years.
Wow.
It's an island of population 650,000 people. I would say about 30 to 40% of them are expats, and not like old expats. We're talking like younger generation expats. Good night. It's like mini Ibiza at times. It's chill boat life, if you like that sort of thing. And it's an easy place to get around Europe and MENA from. So like you just pop in, out. We have a direct flight to every major city in Europe every day. London, like 9 times a day.
Wow.
It's a good place. People like living there, low cost of living. And if you're in the crypto space, 0% capital gains tax on your crypto holdings. And that ain't too bad.
And why do you think Malta is forward thinking like that? Why are they like into crypto?
We don't have resources, right? We have to be smart. Otherwise we ain't making money, and there's only so many hotel rooms we can have on the island. Right. So it's a fact. So what we did is first, way back in like the 2000s, we started regulating online gambling. There was no regulation for online gambling in the world, and Malta created one. That actually attracted all the major online gambling providers to Malta. In fact, every single one is based out there. So
that's when I first heard about Malta was online gambling like 5-6 years ago. Yeah. It makes sense. Okay.
So they did that. Yeah. It did well, but then other jurisdictions wanted pieces of the pie, so they created regulations everywhere. And Malta was saying, okay, we are good in this, and people still probably base themselves here, but we can't put all our cookies in one basket. And they created some good financial services structures, and then financial services structures and blockchain sort of made sense together. So they said, okay, what about we create digital assets law and digital assets regulation? Right. Because if you have the regulation, people know the playground in which they're playing in.
Yeah,
right?
And that's the biggest problem in the US, right? Grew up in the last, half decade has been government policy has been very vague and ambiguous. And I think on purpose, right? Like they haven't really wanted to like put regulation for like a variety of reasons. But obviously like now, like you're like a lot of with like MiCA rules that are coming up, and obviously you're an expert in that. We would love to dive into that as like well, but like that's like a big like problem for the industry.
Oh yeah, it's a big problem for the industry, especially those people who haven't been doing the greatest things, or like, for example, they're completely anonymous, right? So like we like being anonymous in crypto, but once you get regulated, then you have other rules which sort of are attached onto it. There's things like are called the travel rule of how you move money across borders in Europe. There's the whole thing about KYC and AML, and you have to know your customer. You at the end of the day, if I'm receiving funds from some dodgy oligarch in the middle of Russia, that might not be seen as money we can use in the European market. So that's a problem that right now we need to solve. And in fact, one of the projects I advise is working on solving that. It's called Zekret. And it's just about creating those rules, but giving enough information so that the regulators or the banks or everybody can cover themselves, but at the same time allowing us still to be anonymous within this really nice, safe playground.
Can we chat a little bit about Zekret? Because I mean, there's a couple of people trying to tackle this industry, right? And it's obviously in the head of the investors is always a very slow moving. Like, I mean, as soon as you have governments and anything of these kind of sorts of organizations involved, there's a lot of red tape. It's long sales cycles, right? It's a lot of education needed. They're mostly not the most tech savvy organizations, right? So
not at all. So
like, I would love to understand, like, why did Zekret get involved in this? Like, what are they trying to do exactly, and how difficult is it?
So, I mean, Zekret, the team behind it has been in crypto a long time. They were degens themselves initially, and they like DeFi. I mean, DeFi gives access to the average guy to instruments that we would never had, right? I mean, we would get our like 2% from the bank if we're lucky, and we lock it up for 9 months, which again is unfair and just makes the rich richer and the rest of the people not play in this space. So they saw this issue at hand, the fact that, oh my God, Europe can't really play in DeFi anymore because we have regulation. Right. So what's going to happen? And it's more about letting the common man play in here. So what they're doing is they're creating easiest way to put it is, imagine you're in a playground and there's some kids on that playground and they break other people's toys, or they cheat in games, or whatever happens. But then there's this like sort of special playground that you check in with first, and you can bring your toys in first and it's checked. And then you can go in and out of this playground anytime you want once you've done that first check-in. And all the toys in there can be played. And if someone breaks something, the right person knows who broke it, but not everybody has to know who broke it. So we still have that little bit of anonymity. And you can then go out of the playground when you want. And when you come back in, you have that same ID. So it's all about identification and giving the people who need to know the right information, but we don't need to know each and every transaction you're making. We don't need to know if it's between you two or between us. We just need to know enough to make it safe and secure.
And then the goal here is to basically get known that people are checking in that playground.
Exactly.
Projects checking in that playground.
So the idea is here is that it's again, this playground, the projects come in, they have one project's the slide and the other one's the roundabout, and people can come and play on these things and be within this space, be within DeFi, and they can just ride the rails of this really nice, secure framework, which just falls completely MiCA compliant. And again, the background of the team over there, they've been in the regulatory space, either as the regulator or on the other side, applying for these licenses. So they know all the pains of what goes through this. So it's not people who have gone through the first rodeo. And to be honest, I don't think anybody who would go into like this sort of framework would ever do that.
I think you have to have a little bit of connections to make that work. But that special playground you kind of mentioned, is that set up? Like, how do I need to picture that? Is that all the governments coming together creating it, or like they creating their own? And
just imagine like when you go into an exchange today. So you put your money in an exchange and you're trading on an exchange. Now that 9 times out of 10 is centralized.
Yeah.
This is decentralized, centralized. So it's one big chain where all these tokens can trade value between it. Mm-hmm. But when they come into the ecosystem, they're checked. And when they go out, they're checked. But whatever you do when you're in the ecosystem, you're not. So it's essentially the word that the team uses is a confederated consensus of blockchains. I think I got that one right, Kels, right? Okay. Confederated consensus of blockchain. So it's like different blockchain layers, which just work on different levels and different people see what they need to see.
It makes a lot of sense. But this is mainly for companies only in Europe, though.
Well, no, it's going to happen. This is going to happen all around the world. Wherever regulation is going to come to play, you're going to have KYC. The banks are going to need information. Your business partners are going to need information. They're going to need to know how money flows for that. So right now, Europe is a big issue because we already have the regulation, but the US is going to have that regulation within 2-3 years. Right. So rather than start setting up a whole bunch of different things whereby you end up having to move it anyway into something like this, why not set up in a regulation ready framework from the word go, which doesn't cost you anything more?
Now, my question is, I like the idea, right? But as we have a lot of countries in the world and a lot of different regulations and different governments, do you think this is going to be one playground? Or are there going to be like 100 different playgrounds? Or like, I'm going to check in from that playground into the other playground?
I think initially they'll be separate. I think they'll be separate playgrounds. And I mean, some countries will use Zekret, and some like unions like Europe will use Zekret, and others may use other solutions. But I think ultimately we'll see a one world thing. But this is after everything that happens with 2030 and the billion people that lose their jobs to AI or on UBI and that all that sort of thing. Yeah. That's further down the line. For now, it's the sort of bigger nations and bigger unions that will be deciding on the solutions they're going to be using.
Very interesting. Now let's come back to kind of Malta. I think is kind of an interesting topic because I heard it many, many times now. Is there a lot of projects now incorporating in Malta, working with what's the status?
So right now, a lot of big players are coming to Malta. I'm not sure if I've already mentioned this, but OKX. So OKX has just got their license last year. Gemini announced their headquarters in Malta for Europe, I think about 4 weeks ago. Crypto.com has been a long-term resident of Malta, where they have all their legal teams and back office over there. We have about 2 or 3 other big players, which I know will be announcing something, hopefully within the 6 to 8 weeks. We have a number of projects which are now looking at it, and also a number of funds which are looking at Malta because we have really good people who know their stuff, and especially when it comes down to crypto regulation. Because they've been doing it for 7 years, whereas many others don't quite understand MiCA yet, because their regulations were either very light, like Estonia, for example, was a very easy to get regulated in Estonia previously, but now that's having to change for all those companies because they have to fit within MiCA. So a lot of people are just coming down because our lawyers know how to do it, our regulators know how to do it, and we're issuing licenses at a fast but strong, secure pace. So we're not just dishing them out to everybody.
I think a lot of companies come to the space, right, to us, many other funds, and especially when they're early, they still haven't set up a structure, right? And they cannot go fundraise because they cannot sign a SAF with their own name, right? That become a massive problem. So they need to have a foundation, they need to have an offering company, and then many lawyers are charging horrendous fees, right? $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 to set up simple structures. And I remember a lot of structures we set up was Singapore Cayman, right? Singapore Foundation, Cayman or BVI, the offering. That got more difficult because of the bank account situation. And now people moved to Panama, right? And then obviously the UAE came out with their framework from Abu Dhabi and both in Dubai in itself. And now that there's the European Union that got a lot more strict, and then you have the outliers like Malta, Cyprus, probably to an extent. But I think a lot of it comes down to speed and cost, right? In Singapore, when we set up on the previous fund, it took us like almost a year to get the license. And I think it was a lot of money, and it just was, it was a good and thorough process, but it was a painful process.
Yeah. And again, I don't blame Singapore for doing it, because again, you don't want bad players coming into to the space, and that higher amount of capital makes a difference on who's going to come play. Malta, we still have strict policy, but we try to get things done faster. Again, we're a very small nation and smaller governments. So when we bring people in, we try to vet them fast and use trusted people on the island to be part of their boards and things like that, because we have reputations to risk on our island. Like when you're 600,000 people, you can't do bad things, right? You do bad things, everybody's going to know, and you're going to be like booted out. And
it's like high school.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's like a massive high school.
Yeah. You cheat on one girlfriend and you're screwed.
You could cheat. Usually maybe on one in high school, but no, it's literally that situation.
Where are you from originally?
Originally from Toronto.
Okay.
That's why the accent. I was born in Toronto, moved out to Malta when I was 13. My dad wanted to go back to the island, and that was a backwater back then. Like Malta.
You're an island kid.
Yeah, I became an island kid, but an island kid going from west, like Toronto, like a capital city that had cinemas and stuff like that and McDonald's, to Malta, which had two cinemas at the time. But I do remember the last film I saw in Toronto was Jurassic Park in '93. And it came to Malta, and I'm not joking, it was like a year later. So like there was a big communications barrier. But then when the internet hit, everything changed for the island. And we just fast forward. In fact, we're one of the world's leading countries when it comes down to education, especially IT literacy and adoption of anything that's to do with like the digital world.
Wow. It's fascinating that some small countries really make the most out of it. Mm-hmm. In Europe, it's nice to see, because you have a bunch of these small islands, right? And like some of them are just hotel rooms, if even.
That's it.
And some of them actually understand and take the opportunity and go on all sorts of different spaces to attract companies to come. And then obviously, like, I think Malta has a very favorable tax situation.
Oh yes, very favorable,
especially in Europe. Mm-hmm. A lot of people go to Cyprus and Malta because they want to stay in the European Union. They don't want to be a Dubai resident or like go to some other Middle Eastern place and still have the benefit of the European Union, of the passport, of all these other things, and benefit from that. So I'm excited.
You should be. I mean, the one thing that you're going to find, and when you guys will be down in Malta later this year for an event we're holding down there, you're going to find it's a very interesting place. And I always say Malta.
My first time in Malta, by the way.
Sorry?
It's going to be my first time.
Your first time? Oh, wow.
I've never been.
Okay. I think we should bring you in summer though as well, because the summer life is great. So if you're vacationing around Europe, that's where you need to be. But we're going to have ours in November, so it's not as warm, but it is a beautiful place. We have more history in Malta than, like, per square meter than anywhere else in the world. The oldest freestanding buildings in the world are in Malta. And it's a crazy place. My house was built in 1629, just as an example.
Wow. Did you become a tourism ambassador for Malta?
Oh yeah. No, well, funnily enough,
we have the governor of Malta on.
I fall under the same ministry, funnily enough. So, hey, I'm hitting two birds with one stone. I'm sure the minister would be very proud at this moment.
Who knows? Maybe we'll get him on in the pod in November.
We'll speak to him soon.
Yeah. No, it's fascinating because for us, obviously, Toby's more in Singapore, more like in the US and in Mexico as well. And, you go to different parts of the world, and like crypto is like the one thing that like unites people. It doesn't matter like where you come from Toronto, Malta, Europe, Singapore, it doesn't matter where, like if you understand crypto and that's like one thing we love about the industry, but also just with regulation coming up and how like it just gives people a framework, and just like what Malta's done, Singapore's done. And me as an American, it's been sad just seeing like the last, decade, like we haven't become a leader. Now Trump's saying that we're going to become a leader. We'll see. That's TBD, like on regulation here. But it's exciting to see like Europe's taking that step forward, and like there's companies building around that to give these like frameworks for people to actually get into crypto more, right? Like provide opportunity.
No, it's an exciting time. I mean, I have very high hopes for the US. I mean, extremely high hopes. We all know it's the future, and some people have maybe been delaying it because they need to get out of old positions. But once we embrace it, we're going to go to places like we've never seen before. We're going to help a lot of people, and hopefully equalize a little bit of society so that we don't have the have and the have-nots.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, what's really interesting about like the stable coins, right? Where USDT and USDC, I don't think the US government originally realized like it's a way to get more US dollars into everyone's hands globally. And you think of the next 10 years with a lot of unstable currencies, it just makes like sense.
It makes a lot of sense. And like considering last year, I think it was that the oil was used to be priced in the dollar.
Yeah.
And that agreement expired last year. So there's no longer an agreement I'm not sure if it's Saudi Arabia or the MENA region to do that. Well, luckily they had things like Tether and USDC around because that gave a lot of value to the US dollar because that's where people still wanted to trade. Had it not been the case, I would have wondered where the US would have gone last year.
That's a really good point.
Scary place. But I'd love to. I mean, we're big on events, and you're hosting an event down there, and we're always excited to come down and check it all out. Maybe a couple words on the events before we wrap up, just to give people like, what is it going to be? You know, a lot of audience might want to also go there.
Okay, so what we're looking at doing is it's going to be called the Nights of Blockchain. It's a 4-day event. First day event is going to be focused on investment, where we bring down the investors, all the major investors in the Web3 space, bring down their best project. We literally have people vote. It's sort of like a Dragon's Den with like 50 VCs or something, but everybody puts in a pool at that beginning, and whichever projects come out top are going to take the sort of prize. But it gets the investors together and also allows them to sit down and have an outlook of where we want to see 2026 going. So that's day one. Day two and day three are all about what I call the new economy. We are going to go to a world which is going to be very different soon. 1 billion people will lose their jobs due to AI, which means a lot of people will have a lot of free time on their hands. And how are they going to have purpose? Yeah. So by bringing together traditional brands, creators, and the Web3 digital asset space, we're going to find ways that these people can actually find value in this new economy that will be coming in the future, but also look for outlooks for the short term, 26, 27 and onwards.
Amazing. Now, we are excited to make my first trip to Malta as a European German citizen. Sad to say, but apparently it is how it is.
Yeah, you've been to 50 countries. Haven't been to Malta, man.
And Malta wasn't the list.
Oh, wow.
So I deeply apologize for my, challenging cultural behavior.
Yeah. Well, you've had to go to South America a lot recently, so it's been fortunes on the other side of the world from Malta right now. But
but that's good. No,
maybe in the summer
we'll get you down for a summer trip, a summer preview trip, right? So
we're going to be there in the summer for ECC.
Okay, yeah. Oh, that's just around the corner.
Yeah. And then tomorrow, Thailand likely.
You're going to do a little. Yeah. We'll see.
There's a lot of places to go. Yeah,
I appreciate you coming on, and it was always a pleasure to have you.
Thank you so much.
And learn more about the whole regulatory body. If anyone wants to connect, obviously, we'll put your details.
Yeah, I guess how can people learn more about what you're doing, and also Zekret? Like, where can people reach out? Twitter? Or
So for me, Twitter or anything. My handle is @SirWes. That's across the board, always verified. Please, because some people lost some big money because they thought it was me. For me, Zekret. But then check Zekret out on Zekret. And you're going to be hearing a lot more about this in the next couple of weeks as more announcements are coming.
Fantastic.
Awesome. Cool.
Amazing.
Thanks for coming on, man.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and we'll get back to you.